Rusame reader, Song, and today I will be reading to you from Stars and Moonflowers in Our Garden by Rainbow Star _772. That's me! Now, on to Chapter 8, Magical Incidents and Notes. America quickened his pace, hoping to find less damage than what he knew was common in magical incidents. If it was anything like what happened with magical duels, God help whoever tried using magic improperly. If he got to them first, he wasn't sure what he'd do, but if Japan got to them first, there'd be hell to pay. He wasn't sure which of them would have more mercy on the person who caused this mess, but he supposed it would depend on the amount of injuries and severity of said injuries. The more there were, especially if they fell on the more severe side of the spectrum, Japan would be the more merciful one. Japan would also be more ruthless as injuries increased, but she'd still be far more merciful than him. Once he and Mexico got to the training ground B, they found Japan there, scolding who he assumed was the perpetrator. America sighed as he scanned the scene, quickly finding the person Mexico suspected had a concussion. "Hey, Sakura!" he called out to Japan. "I need you to give me a light source. A small one, not too bright, just checking for signs of a concussion." Japan threw one of her sticks that emitted light at the tip. She called them torches, but he called them flashers. Torches were associated with fire for him. "Thanks," he called as he caught the flasher. He used it to check if the pupil was constricted at the sign of light at a normal speed. To his dismay, they took too long to respond to the light, meaning that the person did have a concussion. It depended on the severity, but he wanted them to be monitored and on bed rest for a good amount of time. He'd also probably give them some field poppies for pain relief. Their head was going to be killing them for a while. "Mexico, take this one to the medical wing. Tell them to monitor them. They have a concussion, so they'll be there for a while," America said calmly, gesturing to the half-conscious person. "I'll get them some poppies when they're fully conscious." Once Mexico had picked the person up, he moved over to the next person who was injured. He checked them over. Luckily, they had a mild headache and not a concussion. He kept moving around, checking anyone who seemed to be injured. He found several people with sprains, 3 people with broken bones, and 1 with a few scrapes and bruises. He told the people with sprains not to use the areas affected for a few days. He tried to set up a buddy system to ensure that people wouldn't further injure themselves. He treated the broken bones the best he could, making sure none of the 3 had dislocations. Thankfully, there were none. He whistled for Samuel. Once the crow was there, he asked the crow to get some supplies for casts. Samuel called, then flew off. A few minutes later, the crow came back with the supplies that he needed. America grabbed a small treat from his bag and thanked the crow. He sighed and then got to work, getting casts on people with broken bones to keep them from further injuring themselves. Once he was done, he relaxed a bit. "Come to me after about 3 weeks. I'll be checking on the progression of your healing. If you're fully healed, then I'll remove the casts," he informed, sighing a bit. "But until those are removed, I want you to rest and get help from your friends. And for the love of God, keep them from getting wet. You'll have to live with a stinky cast. I'm only warning you once." He then went about treating the person who got off easy with scrapes and bruises. It was the easiest, and they'd be fine before the end of the week. Once he was done, he got up and checked the time. It was 5:50. He had 10 minutes left of his shift. He grabbed the piece of paper from his bag and jotted down the basics of injuries and how he treated them. He was walking to his office while he did this. He was going to leave the notes on his desk. He'd copy them over when he got back from his trip the next day. He put the notes on his desk and started his walk to his quarters. He found himself hoping he might run into Russia on his way there. He was a bit disappointed when he didn't, and walked into his room. His friends weren't there today. Thankfully so, because he was a bit tired. He went over to the window and opened it, letting the breeze in. He went over to his desk and started writing a small note. He'd have Samuel deliver it in the morning. As for now, he just wanted to tend to the flowers and the garden. He changed into something a bit more befitting of gardening and started his usual route. He eventually reached the chamomile flowers where he'd gotten the first letter, then started to tend to the flowers. After he'd cared for them, he slipped his response under them carefully. He hung back for a moment, looking to see if his mysterious messenger wanted to show his face. After they didn't show up, he just continued his route. Once he was back in his quarters, he got out of his gardening clothes and went to take a bath. Once he was done, he dried off and got into pajamas. Then he went off to his bed and laid down, pulling the covers over him. It took a moment to fall into a comfortable rest. He woke up at 6:30 and immediately remembered the note on his desk. He whistled for Samuel and rolled up the note, tying it with a purple ribbon. He gave the note to Samuel and told him to take it to Russia at the earliest convenience. He then watched as the bird flew off in the morning air, smiling a little. Then he got his clothes to the day together, quickly getting dressed. And that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed. Anyway, I'd like to invite you to join the Discord, which is linked down in the description below. That being said, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, night, or whatever it is for you. Just enjoy your time, and I will see you tomorrow.